Welcome back to the Behind the Print podcast, where we feature industry leaders and uncover the creative minds and their businesses within the world of professional printing. Our mission is to provide you with inspiring, actionable resources that elevate your business projects and accelerate your journey to excellence in profit and in print. Today's episode is 19 miles of railroad on a calendar, and joining me here today is Railroad Museum of New England Chairman Howard Pincus. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Connor. Thanks for having us on today.
Well, thank you for joining us. If you're ready, let's just dive right in. Sound good?
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do.
I've been involved in heritage railroads, what some people might call old trains, for over 50 years. I started when I was 16, 17 years old and have been involved in restoration of locomotives and cars, working on track, operating trains, raising money, dealing with volunteers and employees and state agencies, federal agencies, you name it. There's a lot that goes into it. Most of the time, it's a lot of fun. For the past 30 years, our group has been operating a 19-mile railroad in northwestern Connecticut called the Naugatuck Railroad, which is the original name of the line when it opened up in 1849. And our new company, the new Naugatuck Railroad, was certainly a nod to that existing history.
That's interesting. And speaking of history, I saw on your website that the Railroad Museum of New England is in the process of restoring a vintage Baldwin steam locomotive. Can you tell me about how that project's going?
Yeah, that engine is 100 years old. Actually, this month it was finished in November 1925.
Oh, wow.
And it last operated in 1977. We have started working on the restoration of that locomotive a couple of years ago. The first thing that we did was a survey of it to determine what sort of condition all the various components were in. Even with a survey like that, in restoring old locomotives and rail cars, you never really know what you have until it's finished. People say, well, how much is it going to cost and how much time will it take? And the real answer is, well, we'll know when it's all done. When will it be ready? Well, it'll be ready on Tuesday. Which Tuesday? Well, we'll let you know when we get to the finished part of the project. But seriously, we're looking at raising a few $100,000 for the project, and we don't really want to start taking the thing apart until we are at least half to two-thirds of the way there on that anticipated fundraising. That eliminates the unfortunate situation of having a locomotive in pieces that's partially restored and not enough money to finish the job.
It's good
We
thinking.
it's happened in other rail heritage groups, and we have a couple of projects in our past that let's just say we've learned our lesson from.
How do you go about finding spare parts or replacement parts for that? I doubt that they still make those. Do you have
Uh,
to manufacture them yourselves?
in most cases, yes. There are some very small boutique suppliers in the heritage rail industry that can make some of the parts. Some of the more common parts are standard between locomotives. Most of the rest of it is a matter of fabricating what you need.
I can imagine that has its own set of challenges.
It does. We're fortunate in that in our restoration shop, we have a group of extremely talented, extremely dedicated, extremely resourceful, and very young mechanics, welders, fabricators, electricians. And there is very little that I consider to be beyond their capabilities. The oldest one of them turned 26 last month. One of the things that we've faced in the old train world is the aging of us boomers that sort of got this whole thing started back in the 60s. We learned from the last of the old timers that actually worked on the steam locomotives, and we've preserved that knowledge. And a number of people that are my contemporaries have gone on to restore most of the locomotives that are still operating in the US today. But we are getting on in years, and if we don't pass that knowledge along, it won't exist, and these things will wind up getting parked and not being able to operate. And one of the really encouraging things to me personally has been the ability to mentor and teach the skills that I've acquired over the years to a new group of very enthusiastic young people. And this is not just happening at Railroad Museum of New England and the Naugatuck Railroad, but this is happening across the country. 15 or 20 years ago, some of us were pretty worried about getting young people involved in this field. And that, I am very happy to say, has turned out not to be a problem right now.
Well, it's very good to hear that young people are still out there keeping history alive.
Well, this stuff is real, particularly a steam locomotive. Our number 103 is a fairly small engine. It's very approachable. If our crew does a good job on that, we have a larger one, a little more impressive. And when the time comes, it'll be a matter of, well, you did one, here's the next one. It's the same, just a little bit bigger. I've worked with young heritage railroad people in at other railroads over the last 4 or 5 years, and I have found them to be dedicated, hardworking, eager to learn, and nothing stops them. They're dealing with in a in a digital world, and I know that is such a cliche of a phrase, but this is real. This is real steel, real iron and bronze and brass parts, and you take a hunk of steel and you make a part out of it to replace something that's 100 years old, and you put it together and it works. The engine
Heck,
boils water and the whistle blows and the wheels move, and something that is 100 years old comes back to life. And there's a lot of satisfaction in that. There's satisfaction in preserving the history, and there's also satisfaction in bringing something that doesn't work, that hasn't worked in decades, back to life.
oh, I can't wait to see it finally complete. I also saw on your website that the RMNE offers quite a lot of Christmas themed train rides. Can you tell me a little bit about your Christmas trains?
Yes, we started operating what we call the Northern Lights Limited about 15, 16 years ago. We offer 2 evening trips and 2 daytime trips. The train is decorated and lit both inside and outside, and our trips are approximately an hour and 20 minutes long. We offer different levels of accommodation on board. We have standard coach seating generally in our 1920s, what we call the heavyweight cars, the classic era cars with the opening windows and all of the rivets on the outside. And we also have premium accommodations in some newer cars. What we're working on to debut this year in the 2025 Christmas train season are 3 cars that used to operate on a Santa Fe railway between Chicago and California. They're called high-level cars. And just that, the passenger seating is on an upper level with some very expansive windows in the sides and up into the ceiling of the car. So those will be new for us this year, and those will accommodate some of our premium riders. We
Okay.
have Santa, Mrs. Claus, a number of elves that accompany them throughout the train, and we're now at the point where we have people riding with us that rode with us as kids, and now they're bringing their own young families back. We have some families that have ridden with us 6 or 7 years in a row. So it's very festive. It's very busy. One of our jobs at the railroad, both at Christmas time and other times of the year, is putting smiles on people's faces. That's what we're all about.
It sounds like a wonderful tradition. So, I also saw that your train service, the Naugatuck Railroad, also offers a freight service. What can you tell me about your freight service clients?
We have a couple of rail freight customers at the moment. Our railroad is a little over 19 miles long. It's owned by the state of Connecticut Department of Transportation, and we have a long-term operating agreement to run the railroad. Part of our operating agreement is that we not only provide excursion passenger service, but we also provide commercial freight service. And starting in 2016, we have been operating 2 or 3 times a week for a freight customer that moves construction and demolition debris out to landfills in the Midwest of the US. And those trains operate a couple times a week as needed. We have another customer that came online 2 years ago, a local recycling company, and they ship scrap steel to be recycled at steel mills. We have a couple of other customers that we are talking to as far as developing some additional business. These things can sometimes take quite a while to come to fruition. For example, our major customer, the construction and demolition company, took 9 years from the first conversation to the first freight car moving. We have a lot of patience in the railroad business.
That's interesting. I take it you use modern trains for that. You don't send out your vintage models.
That's right. In fact, in the case of both of these customers, they use contemporary modern rail freight cars. The construction and demolition company just purchased 60 new cars over the last 3 years, the newly manufactured cars. We don't use the vintage stuff for that.
I figured. I was just curious. So, next question, how can you tell me about how print has helped elevate your business? I have your most recent calendar here, and it turned out great. The finish, it looks amazing.
And we've been very happy with the results that we achieved with last year's calendar, the 2025 calendar. We've always done a lot with print newsletters and that sort of thing, although that's been on a hiatus for a little while. We are bringing the print newsletter back. We started in 2019 issuing a calendar, a full color 13-month calendar. And we used a local printer in our region that did a very good job, but they were very expensive. And doing a little research online, we found your printing center, and we decided to give you guys a try last year. And we were extremely happy with the results and with the price. So doing it again this year was absolutely a no-brainer for us. Print is something that is a lot like old locomotives and old rail cars. It's real. You can touch it. You can not hold a locomotive in your hand, but certainly a calendar, a brochure. One of the things that we're looking at is a guidebook, booklet form of publication that we can distribute to our visitors, that tells about the history of the railroad and something about some of the rail cars and locomotives. So print is real, it's tactile. That calendar hangs on people's walls throughout the year, and it reminds them of our railroad, our museum, and our efforts. of that we put into what we do. We feature various scenes along the railroad. I think you would say the based on what you saw in this year's edition, the photography is uniformly very, very good.
That's an outstanding job.
Yeah, well, thank you. We have a number of our people, volunteers and employees who are pretty adept with a camera. And additionally, we try to run at least one vintage photo. One of the things that I've done on the side, if anything is on the side in what we do, spare time, is I've collected vintage photos showing various scenes taken along our actual rail line. And the last 3 years, we featured one of those images in the calendar.
Well, interesting. We very much appreciate you printing with us, and I got to say, I agree with you 100%. When it comes to prints, it's something tangible. You can hold it in your hand. And especially with a calendar, it gives you literally an entire year to display these pictures.
Mhm.
But yes, very much appreciate you printing with us. So, next question. This might be a difficult one for you because your business is already pretty unique, or I guess not for profit, but how do you stand out from other businesses or not for profits in your field?
We have probably 100, maybe 125 heritage railroads and rail museums across North America. I like to say that we're all the same except slightly different. Uh, Groups in, for example, the Pacific Northwest have different problems than we have in Connecticut and in New England. A friend of mine who had a career on Wall Street once said to me, "You're not in the old train business, you're in the allocation of scarce resources business. Resources, time, personnel, funding. There's never enough time, there are never enough people, and there's never enough money. Those things are all challenges. If you're a resourceful group, you can overcome those things, you can work with them. And one of the things that's most important that I have found is community support. We've seen situations where groups have ignored community support and they're not there anymore. Their their tracks are ripped up and a trail, and their rolling stock and locomotive collection is scattered to the winds. And that's it. They're gone. They're done. We have always tried to learn from what goes on in other places. And one of the things that we've always thought to be very important and we work at very regularly is community support. We are located in a town of about 6 or 7 thousand people, Thomaston, Connecticut. And many times during the year, particularly during our fall foliage, our pumpkin patch trains, as we call them, and definitely during our Christmas season, you cannot get a seat in a restaurant, and there are 6 restaurants in Thomaston. You cannot get a seat in a restaurant on a Friday night or a Saturday night because our passengers, our customers, our riders are patronizing those restaurants. And we have a positive, very positive economic impact on our region. And therefore, we have community support. People are happy to see the train go by. People are happy to see our station restored in Thomaston. About 3 or 4 years ago, we started operating on summer evenings, Saturday evenings, up to the north end of our line, up to Torrington, Connecticut. We call it the Torrington Twilight Special. And we come into Torrington, and it's literally a 5 minute walk to the downtown center of town. There's a restored theater, there's a number of restaurants, there's art galleries, there's a scene that has started to come to fruition in Torrington. And we'll have 125 people on that train, and they'll have 2.5 hours to visit the galleries and go to the different restaurants. And that makes quite an impact economically on Torrington.
It's great to hear that you have community support. You went into this briefly, managing scarce resources, but are some challenges or obstacles that are holding you back right now? You already said money, time, people, but can you go into a little more detail about that?
Well, right now, for example, we're planning out projects for the 2026 restoration season. And well, we want to do this and we want to do that, and we want to bring this locomotive in and do X, Y, and Z to it, and we want to bring this rail car in and do A, B, and C to it. And it doesn't take long to realize that, well, all right, we've filled up next year. It's there's always a lot to do, and we try to triage. We try to, obviously, there's maintenance on the operating locomotives and cars at our bread and butter fleet. And there are the long-term restorations that we want to take on, like, for example, locomotive 103. And then there are various challenges as far as future plans. We are hoping to acquire some additional property adjacent to our station and be able to expand our scope and have more of a facility for visitors to learn about the history, to see some of the things that we haven't been able to display. One of our biggest problems right now is actually parking. We don't have enough parking for our visitors. When we started out, quite frankly, I don't think that we realized we'd have that problem.
Not a bad problem to have.
No, no, not a bad problem to have. You mentioned earlier about other rail heritage groups and other rail heritage museums. Sometimes geography is our biggest problem. There's a very well-known, very large museum in Western Illinois called the Illinois Railway Museum. And when they needed more land, they went and bought another 56-acre cornfield. It's wonderful. It's flat, and they can build buildings on it, and really great. We're at the bottom of a narrow river valley, and for example, where our restoration shop is, we had to actually blast solid granite rock to make flat space to put the building on.
Wow.
So our challenges are that when we need parking for our visitors, we have to look at purchasing adjacent properties.
Well, not having enough parking must mean you're doing something right.
Well, exactly. It's dealing with success, and that is always a better problem to be dealing with than my goodness, we are running empty trains here.
So, next question, can you tell me about any major milestones or accomplishments that have really defined the Railroad Museum of New England?
There are a number of them. When we started out in 1968 as a volunteer group that was instrumental in getting another heritage railroad started and underway in the early 70s. And as we looked in the mid 1980s to going off on our own, if you will, it took us some time to find the rail line that we're currently using. We always knew that we had to have an operating vintage heritage train to be popular with visitors. When we got to Thomaston, we saw a wonderful brick 1881 passenger station with a lot of ornate woodwork that had had the roof burned off of it in an arson fire 3 years previously. And the local authorities were getting ready to bulldoze the whole thing, and that was going to be the end of that. And we came along and we said, well, we can do something with this. And we kind of got side eye from both sides that, well, you guys are nuts enough to want to try. Well, all right, we'll deed the property over to you. And working again, local support, the Thomaston Savings Bank, which is a wonderful regional bank that is based right in Thomaston, stepped right up. They called us 2 weeks after we were given the building, and they said, we are putting a roof on your building. We have the contractor all selected. Well, okay. And that has led to a long-term 30-year business relationship with Thomas and Savings Bank. Putting the new roof on the building was the first thing that really saved that building. And we've worked on it bit by bit, grant funding, thousands of volunteer hours have gone into it. And while it's not complete, it's really quite a showpiece. There are some pictures of it in our different calendars over the years. Saving the station and getting it to the point where I would call it about 85% restored right now, that's a major milestone. Uh,
Absolutely.
Another accomplishment was in 2007 opening up our restoration shop. This is a building that's about 11,000 square feet, and it has two tracks inside. It's heated, it's insulated, it has a concrete floor. We don't have to work outside in the mud and the rain and the cold anymore. And that made a tremendous difference in what our volunteers and later our employees and volunteers have been able to accomplish with restoration projects. We can take a 100-year-old rail car and open up the roof, take all the windows out of it, and really get back to completely restoring it without having to worry about, well, it's 5 o'clock. We better get this thing covered up because it's supposed to rain tomorrow.
Well, that's great to hear. It sounds like you guys have made so much progress over the years.
We really have, and some of us that have been around since before the beginning, we drag out some of the old photos to show some of the new folks, some of the younger folks, and they're just flabbergasted. They will look at a picture of a spot that is now our restoration shop. And I'll say, well, that's a forest. Where's the shop? Well, it's after we cut all the trees and blasted all of the granite rock out of the way, that's where the shop is. So people have been able to see a lot of progress, and that's very encouraging. It shows our newer volunteers and a lot of our younger people that, yeah, when you first walk up to one of these things and you see it unrestored and rusty, you wonder, where do you start? How are we ever going to accomplish this? And then when you show people the pictures of what has been restored, what has been brought back to life, that's how you accomplish it. It's the old story about the elephant, one bite at a time.
That was very well put. So, sort of a different question for you here. If you had a day completely free to spend however you'd like, how would you spend it?
Hmm, interesting question.
It trips a lot of
Um,
people up.
I would split it up a little bit. I might sign up as engineer for one of the excursion trains and take a train out over the railroad. I'm a licensed locomotive engineer, licensed by the Federal Railroad Administration. After running that train, I think I would sit for a while in one of the benches on our station platform and watch the train depart and arrive, watch our passengers, watch the little kids jumping out of their skin and squealing with delight when the whistle blows. That would be a pretty good day for me.
Sounds like a good day for you. So, one last question for you here. How can our listeners get in touch with you, book a train ride, make a donation? What's the best way to get in touch?
Well, try our website. We are www.rmne.org. We are located in Thomaston, Connecticut. We are about an hour and a half from New York City and easily accessible. Look us up online. We're also on Facebook at Railroad Museum of New England. I believe we're also on the web as ridethenoggy.com.
Well, very good. Well, I'd say that's a wrap on another episode of Behind the Print. Thank you to our listeners for joining us as we explored the artistry and innovation of the printing world. Remember, having a strong vision, building the right strategy, and using tools like print to amplify your message will make your brand stand out from the crowd. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to pick up your sample pack today from PrintingCenterUSA.com and share it with your fellow business enthusiasts. Until next time, keep those creative sparks flying, and remember, there's always more to discover behind the print.